Guys, can you see me? I can't see myself, so I don't know. Can you see me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's start in this afternoon session by a reflection on the test that you have written. Now, the results of the test was extremely bad. Die uitstraal van die toets was geweldig sleg geweest. En dames en here, as julle nie iets verskrikliks doen en dit verander nie, dan gaan dit aanhou sleg bly. So if there's not a wake-up call and you start doing something to change the situation, then it's going to stay as is, and I'm afraid to say, sorry, that you are not going to progress until the second semester. You know that the next class test is next week in Wednesday. Die volgende klas toets volgende week in Woensdag, en dit was glo 'n verrassing geweest vir 'n klompie van julle. Julle het blykbaar nie besef nie. Nou sê julle, you know what, that working programs is all under module admin. Alles onder module admin op die Fundi. Elke maand sin tot en met die dag wat jy eksamens skryf. So there's no excuse for telling me that it is the price that you didn't know about the test. The test is going to be on a slightly higher level than the first test because you have gained more knowledge from the first test until now. Also, you've been at varsity now for another 3 weeks, and therefore we expect from you to know more by the time that you're going to write the next test. Now, the thing that irritated me the most about the previous test is, it took me, and I'm not kidding, it took me 2 days to do the admin. And let me explain to you what is the process if I want to actually, just to get your test in such a form that we can mark it. I have to go into Ifundi, open up each and every person's test or name. I click on your name, it opens up whatever you have uploaded on Ifundi. Then when I see that you've uploaded something, then I'm happy. If I see that there was no upload, I have to go to the emails. Then I have to scratch through the emails and all the pretty faces from Secunda in order to derive at Piet Pochempel, who has submitted in the incorrect format his name, his surname, his initials, and his student number does not appear in the subject field of the email, nor is his email address some indication of what his name is. Now I have to go back into Ifundi and see if I can retrieve his email address from the system. Then eventually, once I have retrieved his email address, I can now look and search for the email that he supposedly have sent to me. It is horrific, and I'm not going to go through this again. So the first thing, and make a big note, if your email address is not clearly indicated, your name, John Smith @gmail.com or whatever, but John Smith appears in your email address, please get a new email address. And from the next time forward that you're going to submit any test and you're going to give it to me by way of an email, at least I can see in your email address what your name is. That's the first thing. The second thing, in the subject field of your email, your surname first, then your initials, and then your student number must appear. Not test 1, test 2, CAM scanner. Oh, I had millions of CAM scanners. If it's going to be like that once more, I promise you, I'm not even going to go through the trouble looking for your email. Then in the third place, when you save your file on Ifundi, it will automatically submit that file when the time has run out. So whilst you're battling to email this file to me or to submit it on Ifundi, just press the save button. And then if you don't get around to the submit for grading button, because you have pressed the save button, it will automatically be uploaded, submitted when the time has run out. Vir die Afrikaanse ouens, as jy my nou nie gevolg het nie. Die volgende moet gebeur. As jou e-mailadres nie 'n indikasie is van jou naam en van nie, dan kry jy 'n nuwe e-mailadres. Ek wil niks van mooi gedagtes van Potchefstroom hoor nie. Ek wil weet janpochempoel@gmail.com. Right. In die subject field, die onderwerpveld, wanneer jy 'n e-mail stuur, hy sê vir jou aan wie moet ek kom stuur en dan sê hy subject. Daarso-in moet jy vir my skryf. Jou van eerste, dan jou voorletter en dan jou studentenommer. Nie toets 1, toets 2 of toets 3 nie. En dan, wanneer jy jou leer oplaai op die Fundi, druk vir my save. As jy gesave is, as jy daai save knoppie gedruk het, wanneer die tyd uitgehardloop het, dan submit hy hom outomaties for grading, dan lê hy daar. That's also want to stress this to you. It doesn't help that you send me an email without an attachment. Dit help nie, jy stuur vir my e-pos sonder 'n aanhangsel nie, want dan het jy niks gestuur nie. And then some of you had the audacity to argue with me that there was actually an attachment. I then had to take a screenshot and email that to you to prove to you that you haven't sent any attachment. I'm not going to go through all that trouble again. I'm telling you now, that is not on. So, and then some of you have decided it's not important to send me an email. Ja. Dis nie belangrik genoeg nie. Ek gaan nie die instruksies volg wat sy my gegee het nie. Ek gaan sommer my eie instruksies volg. Jy weet, dames en here, jy verdien 0 vir daai toets. You really earn 0 marks for that test. You should not get any marks for that test. Now, there was something went wrong with your upload on Fundi. That happened, I think there was about 5 instances like that. Iets het verkeerd gegaan toe die leer opgelaai het op die Fundi. En weet jy wat gebeur toe? Jy het ook nie jou toets opgelaai of aangeheg aan jou e-mail wat jy gestuur het nie, as jy so ver gekom het om 'n e-mail te stuur, want jy het so myself gedink is onnodig, dat ek niks gehad om te merk nie. En dames en here, hierdie was die eerste en die laaste toets, wat ek enige goed aanvaar het, na die tyd verstreke is. I will not accept in future any emails that was submitted after the time has expired. So don't come to me. Don't try to argue with me. If it isn't there, it isn't there. Just go back and have a look. I don't care if you have sent 5,000 mails. If there's no attachment, you haven't sent anything. So I'm not going to go through this process again. Laat ons mekaar baie mooi verstaan op daardie punt. Okay. Right. Julle het tot gistermiddag 5:00 gehad om julle toetse na die merkers toe teruggestuur vir hermerkdoeleindes. You had until yesterday afternoon, 5 o'clock, to resend or to send your mark test back for remark purposes. To the marker, not to me, to the marker. There was only a few that could send their tests to me. If you've missed the deadline, shame. It's water under the bridge. So as jy daardie tydsraamwerk nie bygehou het nie, jy daai deadline gemis, dan sit maar water onder die brug deur. Dan het jy wat jy het en dit is wat jy het. Dan sê jy sal sien ons skryf 3 klastoetse wat deel uitmaak van jou deelnamepunt. We are writing 3 class tests that forms part of your participation mark. Now, because you guys started so late this year, usually in the past we have written 4 class tests. One of the 4 class tests was always a fall-away test. That means that only the best 3 tests have counted towards your participation mark. So die verlede het ons 4 klastoetse geskryf. Een van daardie toetse was 'n wegvaltoets. Met ander woorde, die beste 3 het dan getel vir jou deelnamepunt. Nou, omdat julle so laat begin het hierdie jaar, is daar nie tyd vir 4 toetse nie. Ek het egter, omdat julle so verskriklik sleg gedoen het in hierdie toets, met die powers to be daarbo gaan gesels, en hulle toegestem dat alhoewel julle nie 3 toetse skryf, net die beste 2 van die 3 gaan tel. So dit beteken julle dan 'n addisionele kans om jou punt te verbeter. Nou as jy die gemiddeld vir hierdie toets was 41%. Guys, I've spoken to the guys there on top, and I have received permission from them that although you're only writing 3 class tests, only the best 2 of the 3 will count towards your participation mark to give you a chance to better yourself. But if you are not properly prepared for next Wednesday's test, it's not going to help you at all. So dit is 'n kans wat in jou gegee word om jou toets so ver as moontlik, jou punte so ver as moontlik te verbeter. So we give you a chance to improve your marks. Because we would really like to see you in the second semester. Actually, I don't only want to lecture 5 people in the second semester. I would like actually more than 5 people that I want to lecture. So there is going to be a fall away test then. Daar is dan 'n wegvaltoets. Goed, dames en here, dis al wat ek het om oor die toets te sê. You had a facilitation session this week where the facilitators went through the test in detail with you. So I think mostly the problems that have happened in the test is as a result of you not reading properly. Die meeste foute wat plaasgevind het, die meeste probleme wat plaasgevind het in die toets, was omdat julle nie ordentlik gelees het wat julle moet doen nie. You know what, we ask you journal entries and I receive trial balances and financial statements. And I said to the markers, because it's the first test, and I understand, I've got sympathy with you, you're very green at this point of time. If you can follow something and you can scratch out a debit and a credit entry, give them the benefit of the doubt. But guys, if you're ever going to do that again, I will give you a round cool 0. If you do not answer the question, if we ask journals, I want a journal. If I ask financial statements, I want a financial statement. If I ask a discussion question, I want a discussion. If you do not answer the question, you will not receive in future 1 single mark for your attempt for that question. So please don't do that again. Don't fall into that trap. Okay, I'm going to do a share screen now. And in that share screen, it's that simple spot the difference. I want you to spot 10 differences in the picture that I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to discuss that. Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a sec. Right. Can you see the 2 pictures there?
Yes, ma'am.
I want you to spot 10 differences between those 2, please. See whether you can spot 10 differences between those 2 pictures. I will give you for 3 minutes. 3 minutes is more than enough. Okay. And don't do it on the screen, do it in a piece of paper because people don't want to see what your attempt is to this. So take your stuff off my screen, please. Yeah, there's still another one. Okay. Take your scratches off my screen, please. Okay, are you done? Let's quickly see. You should have identified the following differences. Here the dog has got teeth, there it doesn't have teeth. There we have birds in the sky, there's no birds in the sky. There's another, what do you call it, tree there at the back there, there's no tree there at the back. If we look at the tail of the dog here is dark, the tail of the dog there doesn't, well, it's also the same color than the rest of the body. Here we have a rock. Here we don't have a rock. Take your flippin' marks off my screen. There's no rock over there. Good. This guy's got a collar on his shirt. That guy doesn't have a collar on his shirt. There we have something that's lying on the grass. There's nothing on the grass there. Here, there's something on top of this water crane. There's nothing there. There's a drop of water over there. There's nothing there. And there we have 2 squirrels and there's nothing there. So that is the 10, or those are the 10 differences between the two. Guys, what you've done now is you have just done a reconciliation. Now, I know when you were at school, they taught you the silly debit credit rubbish when you do a bank reconciliation. It is the biggest rubbish under the sun. What is a reconciliation? A reconciliation is 2 pictures that I have which should look exactly the same, but for some reason it does not look the same. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to identify what are the reasons why they don't look the same. Let's assume that this first picture is my bank account in the ledger, or my cash book payments and my cash book receipts journal where the details are. And let's assume that the second picture here is my bank statement. Now, in a perfect world, my bank statement should have been 100% a reflection of my own bank records, my own cash book records. For some reason, there are differences. And all I'm going to do is exactly as what I've done here. I compare the 2 pictures with each other. And once I'm comparing the pictures, I identify where all the differences are lying. And if I look at my cash book here, or my bank account in the ledger, I see, but if I want to make my ledger the same as the bank statement, so I'm going to start at the ledger balance and I'm going to work towards the bank statement. If I want to make this one the same as that one, I have to add the birds to this one here. I must ask myself, should the birds have been in my records? And if the answer is yes, I'm going to adjust my records so that in my own records, I'm also going to show the birds. If I want to make my bank ledger account balance the same as the bank statement balance, I will have to add that additional tree there to my ledger balance as well. What do I have to do here with the teeth? Well, I have to add the teeth here as well. What about the rock? Well, if I want to look the same as the bank statement, I must take away the rock there, and then it will look the same as the bank statement. If I want to look the same as the bank statement, I must take away the collar there, then I will look the same as the bank statement. If I look at this water crane here, I'm going to take away that lid of the water crane, then it looks the same as here. And the same with the squirrels. I'm going to add the squirrels there, then it would look the same as the bank statement. So depending on what side of the coin I'm going to start, I'm going to start with my record and make it the same as the bank's record, or if I'm going to start at the bank's record and make it the same as my record in the reconciliation, that will depend whether I'm going to add or subtract something. If I started with a bank statement and I said, well, the bank statement, I cannot alter the bank statement, and that is the purpose of the bank reconciliation statement. So anything that I cannot alter in my own records, that will end up in the bank reconciliation statement. So if I started with a balance as per the bank statement, and I'm going to work towards my cash book balance, I would have taken away the birds there. It would have been the same as my cash book balance. I would have taken away that additional tree there. Then it would look the same as my records. I would have taken away the teeth of the dog here. Then it would have been the same as my records. So can you see that whatever I'm going to do, whether I'm starting at the bank statement and add or deduct to get the same picture as the cash book, or if I'm going to start at the cash book and add or deduct to get the same picture as the bank statement, it's the same process. It's just the opposite that I'm going to do. If I started at the cash book, I would have added the birds. If I started at the bank statement, I would have taken away the birds. If I started at the cash book, I would have added the T's. If I started with the bank statement, I would have taken away the T's. That is a bank reconciliation. Have I ever, in this whole explanation, talked about debits and credits? No. That is why that's the biggest rubbish under the sun. You do not talk about debits and credits when you do reconciliation. You say, I've got two pictures. They should look exactly the same. What am I going to do in order to make them looking the same? If something appears on the bank statement that should have been in my records, I'm going to post it in my record so that through the posting in my own record, I'm going to take the difference away. But if there's something on the bank statement which is not in my own records, let's say the bank made a mistake. He posted something on my bank account which actually belonged to another client of them. I'm not going to post that entry in my books. It should not be in my books. Then that thing will end up in the bank reconciliation statement because the bank has to act on that item. So everything like bank charges, that should have been in my records. So if I identified bank charges here on the bank statement, I'm going to post it in my records and then it won't be a difference anymore. So at the end of the day, what is going to end up in the bank reconciliation statement? Only those items which I've already posted, like an outstanding deposit, for instance, in my books, but it still needs to go through the bank, but it hasn't gone through the bank. I will identify those things in my bank reconciliation. And then what will also be on the bank reconciliation are things like mistakes that the bank has made, and that will then be a reconciling item. It will appear in this picture. It will not appear in that picture, and it will never appear on that picture. That is why that will end up in the bank reconciliation. So I hope that we understand now what the bank reconciliation, or any reconciliation for that matter. After your test, we're going to start with creditors and we're going to do creditors reconciliations. And the same principle will apply there. So guys, please, 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 a reconciliation's got nothing to do with debits and credits. It is getting two pictures next to each other. In a perfect world, it should have looked exactly the same. For some reason, it does not look the same. Now, it could be the reasons for that, that some stuff was actually processed by the bank, which I didn't know about. And because I didn't know about that, and I only come to know about that when I receive the bank statement, I must actually post those things in my books, like bank charges, like RD checks, like outstanding deposits. That is all outstanding deposits in my books. It's not on the bank statement. So stuff that I can identify, direct deposits, not outstanding, direct deposits, things that I can identify that happened in my bank account, which I didn't know about, I have to process in my own records because it should have been there. And all other stuff that's already in my own records, but the bank hasn't processed it as yet. That will cause a difference, and that will go to the bank reconciliation statement. I'm not going to adjust my record for a deposit that's not been shown. I showed in my books, but it's not through on the bank statement as yet. But it's correct in my books. I'm not going to take it out of my books. It will stay in my books. But because it stays in my books and it's not on the bank statement, I have to tell the reader that that caused a difference between the balance in my ledger opposing to the balance in my bank statement. So ek het nou baie Engels gepraat en ek hoop die Afrikaanse ouens het my gevolg. So 'n bankrekonsiliasie, dames en here, het niks met debiete en krediete uit te waai nie. Dis twee prentjies wat in 'n perfekte wêreld presies dieselfde moes gelyk het. En al wat ek nou gedoen het is deur my een prentjie met die ander prentjie te vergelyk, het ek verskille geïdentifiseer tussen die twee. Nadat ek die verskille geïdentifiseer het tussen die twee, moet ek myself afvra, moet ek hierdie verskil wat ek geïdentifiseer het in my rekords aanbring? Nou sekere verskille moet ek in my rekords gaan aanbring en dis goed waarvan ek nie geweet het nie. Goed soos bankkostes. Ek het dit eers opgetel toe ek die bankstaat gekry het, maar dit moet in my rekord kom, daaroor moet ek dit gaan inskryf. Sodra ek die bankkoste in my kontant of my kasboek betalingsjoernaal in het, dan is dit mos nie meer 'n verskil tussen die kasboek en die bankstaat nie, so dan het hy verdwyn as 'n verskil. As ek 'n direkte deposito in my bankrekening gehad het, maar ek nie daarvan geweet nie. Toe ek my bankstaat gekry het, het ek dit opgetel en nou moet ek dit in my bankrekening gaan inskryf. Ek moet my kontantontvangstjoernaal gaan inskryf, want dit behoort daar te gewees het, ek het net nie daarvan geweet nie. Maar enige ander inskrywing, kom sê die bank het 'n fout gemaak, hy het 'n betaling van 'n ander kliënt deur my rekening gesit. Gaan ek nou mos nie daardie betaling in my boeke insit nie? Nee, want daardie betaling hoort nie by my nie, maar dit gaan 'n verskil veroorsaak tussen my prentjie en die bank se prentjie. Daarom gaan hy bankrekonsiliasie staat doen. So dis 'n rekonsiliasie. Dit is niks anderste as spot the difference nie. Identifiseer die verskille, punt nommer 1. Punt nommer 2, bepaal of ek daardie items wat ek geïdentifiseer het in my rekords moet aanbring. So as die antwoord ja is en ek het dit in my rekords gepos, dan is dit nie meer 'n verskil nie. Dan kyk ek wat bly oor, watter verskille bly oor en dan daai wat dan oorbly, hulle gaan dan bankrekonsiliasie staat doen. Reg. Is daar enige vrae? Are there any questions surrounding bank reconciliations from your side? Right, so let's proceed. The next study unit, and you've done very bad in this bank reconciliation Ifuni quiz as well. So obviously I have released your answer as well as the correct answer. Go through that again in preparation for the test. Good, then study unit 5. That's all about debtors. Guys, now debtors is extremely important, and you will find something about this whole subject. You will write about this until the end of the year and next year and the year thereafter, etc., etc., etc. So study unit 5 is of extreme importance. Just before we get there, I made a little list. Let's go to this one. Let me just do a screen share again. Good. Got it. Let's start with this one here. Just move this a little bit. Cash equivalence, that is study unit 4. What should you know about this? You should know what is the definition about cash and cash equivalents, die definisie van kontant en kontant ekwivalente. Jy moet die korrekte openbaarmaking kan doen. You must do the correct disclosure of cash and cash equivalents in the financial statements of the entity. You should know exactly what should appear on the face of the statement of financial position and what should appear in the notes for cash and cash equivalents to the financial statements. So jy moet presies weet wat kom op die gesig van die staat van finansiële posisie en jy moet presies weet hoe lyk die nota op kontant en kontant ekwivalente. In die nota doen ons die opbreek van kontant en kontant ekwivalente en ons sal ook sê wat is die oortrokke fasiliteite as daar een is en ons sal ook sê indien enige een van daardie items wat ingesluit is by kontant en kontant ekwivalente dien as sekuriteit vir enige lenings, moet ons die feit vermeld en ook die bedrag vermeld. So guys, in the note of cash and cash equivalents, we give the breakdown, does it consist of? Current accounts, bank accounts, 32 days notice deposits, whatever the breakdown is, we will give that in the note. And also in the note, we have to mention what is the overdraft facility, if there is any. And if any one of these accounts, which is included in cash and cash equivalents, is being given as securitization for a loan, we should mention the fact as well as what is the amount of the secured debt. Good. Then you should also know how the subsidiary journals are working for cash and cash equivalents, which is the cash book receipts and the cash book payments journal. So jy moet weet hoe werk die hulpjoernale, die kontant ontvangsjoernaal, die kontant betalingsjoernaal. You should know all the columns. You should know what the cross-casting of the columns is all about. You should know how we post from those journals at the end of the month to the general ledger account. So jy moet weet wat se kolomme is daar alles in hierdie kontantontvangste en betalingsjoernale. Jy moet die kruisbalansering van daardie kolomme verstaan. Jy moet ook weet dan hoe posteer of hoe pos ons van die totale van daardie kolomme na die algemene grootboek aan die einde van elke maand. And then last thing is our bank reconciliations, which I have just spoken about. Good, then I'm at study unit 5. What should you know about study unit 5? The first thing is, I'll just get rid of this. Right. The first thing is the source documents that's applicable to debtors. Die brondokumente wat op debiteure van toepassing is. The first one is credit invoices, credit notes, receipts, and the bank statement. Why the bank statement? The bank statement is important. It's a source document where there's a direct deposit into our bank account, as well as if there's an RD check or something like that, we have banked the money, we've processed a receipt from the debtor initially, and then it turned out that there was insufficient funds in his bank account, so we have to turn around that initial transaction. Kredietfakture, kredietnotas, kwitansies en die bankstaat. Bankstaat is belangrik want daarin gaan ons goed sien soos direkte deposito's in ons bankrekening vanaf debiteure. Ons gaan ook daar optel wanneer daar byvoorbeeld 'n fake check was of 'n inskrywing omgeswaai is deur die bank omdat daar nie voldoende fondse was in die debiteur se rekening nie. So dit het ook 'n impak op my debiteur se rekeninge. Very important, you should know what subsidiary journals have something to do with debtors. Jy moet weet wat se hulpjoernale het iets met debiteure uit te baai. Now the first one, the obvious one, is our debtors journal. Another name for it is the sales journal, die debiteure of die verkoopsjoernaal. Now again, you should know exactly what columns do we record in these journals. And now remember, in this study unit, we have now learned about 2 additional columns. We know now that there must be a VAT column. And we know now that there must be an allowance for settlement discount column. So guys, you have one example, journals and allowances, where I try to explain to you how important it is that you understand all the columns in the subsidiary journals, how the cross-casting is working, and how the posting is working from the subsidiary journal to the general ledger at the end of the month. So ek het in daai een voorbeeld van joernale en toelaagrekeninge, het ek vir jou probeer verduidelik hoe verskriklik belangrik dit is dat jy die wisselwerking ken van die verskillende joernale, die kolomme in daardie hulpjoernaal, hoe die kruisbalansering van daardie kolomme plaasvind en hoe die posterings na die algemene grootboek van daardie hulpjoernaal aan die einde van die maand na die algemene grootboek geskied. Dis verskriklik belangrik. So you should know that for the debtors journal, the debtors allowances journal, die debiteure afslagjoernaal of verkoopsterugsendingsjoernaal is dieselfde ding. The cash book receipts journal has an impact on debtors. The kontant ontvangstjoernaal het 'n impak op debiteure. How, what, where, why? As soon as the guy is paying me, that payment will be recorded in the cash book payments journal. Daardie betaling wat ek van hom ontvang, kom in die kontant ontvangstejoernaal. And guys, please do yourself a favor and go and have a look how we record that receipt in the cash book receipts journal. Hoe word daardie ontvangste in die kontant ontvangstejoernaal aangeteken? Watter bedrag gaan na die bankkolom toe? Watter bedrag gaan na die debiteure kolom toe? Watter bedrag gaan na die BTW kolom toe en watter bedrag gaan na my toelaag of vereffeningskorting kolom toe? So guys, it's extremely important that you know that in your cash book journal, a cash book receipts journal, what amount goes to the bank column, what amount goes to the debtors column, what amount goes to the VAT column, and what amount goes to the allowance for settlement discount column. If you don't know that, I'm going to catch you out for sure. You're going to fail again. Okay. Cash book payments journal for debtors, huh? Mrs. Swart, are you losing it? No, my dear, I'm not losing it. Where do we record an RD check? In the cash book receipts journal, in the cash book payments journal? In the cash book payments journal. So wanneer 'n check GVT is, of wanneer 'n vorige deposito wat ek gemaak is, omgeswaai word omdat daar nie voldoende fondse is in 'n debiteer se rekening nie, waar gaan ek dit aanteken? In die kontantbetalingsjoernaal. Dit is hoekom hy ook iets met debiteure uit te waai kan hê. And then the general journal, the algemene joernaal. What do we post in the general journal? Guys, things like credit losses. That will be posted in the general journal, not in the debtors journal or in the debtors allowances journal, in the general journal. Die algemene joernaal, goed soos kredietverliese afgeskryf. Dit gaan deur die algemene joernaal. Goed soos rente op debiteerrekeninge, things like interest on long outstanding debtors accounts, that will also be posted via the general journal. Now, whilst I'm talking about general journals, if I ask you in a test or exam to do the general journal, it is just for me a shortcut to test whether you know how the ledger entries are working. As ek vir algemene joernaal inskrywings in 'n toets of eksamen vra, is dit net om te toets of te sien of jy weet hoe lyk die grootboek inskrywings op daardie spesifieke transaksies. So guys, if I ask you general journal entries, then you don't give me subsidiary journal entries. As ek vir jou algemene joernaal inskrywings vra, gee nie vir my die hulpjoernale se inskrywings nie. Then you will tell me exactly with each and everything on that question, what account is debited and what account is credited. Vir elke liewe ding in daardie vraag moet jy vir my sê, watter rekening is gedebiteer en watter rekening is gekrediteer. Ek kon net soveel vir jou T-rekeninge gevra het. I might as well ask you T-accounts. But for it's much easier to mark a general journal entry than a T-account. Dit is baie makliker om 'n algemene joernaal inskrywing te merk as 'n T-rekening. So if I ask you, give me the general journal entries for the transactions above, then for each and every transaction, you will tell me what account should be debited and what account should be credited. As ek vir jou algemene joernaal inskrywings vra vir transaksies wat ek vir jou gee in die vraag, vir elke transaksie moet jy vir my sê watter rekening is gedebiteer en watter rekening is gekrediteer. Do not forget to give me your statement indications. Moenie vergeet om vir my jou staatindikasies te gee nie, want dames en here, jou staatindikasie gaan bepaal of jy 'n halwe punt gaan kry vir die rekening wat jy noem. Jy het dit nou gesien op jou memorandum vir die eerste toets. If you didn't give me the correct account and the correct statement indication, you didn't earn a half mark. So as jy nie vir my die regte rekeningnaam en die regte staatindikasie gegee het nie, het jy daai eerste halfpunt nie gekry nie. So it's very important, the statement indication. This also has something to do with subsidiary ledgers. What subsidiary ledgers are we talking about? We talk about the debtors ledger. Ek het 'n hoop grootboek waar debiteure aangaan. Dis my debiteure grootboek. Wat gebeur in my debiteure grootboek? Alle transaksies wat ek met die debiteure deur die maand aangegaan het. Alle verkope aan hom. Alle ontvangste, gelde wat ek ontvang het van hom. Alle rentes wat ek gehef het. Alle afskrywings soos kredietverliese. Dit gaan alles in sy individuele rekening wat in die debiteure grootboek verskyn in. So in my hulpjoernale, elke lyntjie wat in die hulpjoernaal ingeskryf word, dit word gepos na die debiteure grootboek toe. Guys, what appear in our debtors ledger? All the individual debtors accounts and all the transactions that I've done with that debtor during the course of the month is being entered into his account. So if we go to our subsidiary journals, each and every line item that appears in the subsidiary journal, i.e. in the debtors journal, debtors allowances journal, whatever, that is being posted to that individual debtors account, which appears in the subsidiary ledger. What happens at the end of the month? At the end of the month, I extract all the balances from the debtors ledger. Aan die einde van die maand haal ek 'n lys uit van al die saldos van die debiteure wat in hierdie hulpgrootboek verskyn. I add up the list, the balances of all these debtors. I call that the debtors list. So in the debtors list appears all the names of my individual debtors with a balance of each and every debtor. At the end of the month, I add that list together. So all those balances I add up, and that total must balance back to my debtors control account in the general ledger. So aan die einde van die maand kry ek 'n lys van al my debiteure wat in die debiteure grootboek verskyn, plus die uitstaande saldos van elke individuele debiteur. Ek tel daardie lys bymekaar aan die einde van die maand en ek kry 'n groot totaal. Daai groot totaal van die debiteure lys moet terugbalanseer na die saldo van my debiteurskontrolerekening in die algemene grootboek. What do I post to my debtors control account? Wat pos ek na my debiteure kontrolerekening toe? Only the sum totals of my subsidiary journals. Net die groot totale, die som totale van die kolomme van die hulpjoernale word na die debiteure kontrolerekening toegepos. Now watch out here. Does the debtors control account include that? Sluit die debiteure kontrolerekening BTW in? Natuurlik. Wat word in die debiteurskontrolerekening geboekstaaf? Uitstaande faktuurbedrag, outstanding invoice values is reflected in my debtors control account. So, what happens now at the end of the month? At the end of the month, I post totals to my control account. Totale word na my kontrolerekening toegevoeg en daaroor moet sy saldo dan met die detail wat in die ledger in die debiteure grootboek lê ooreenstem. So because I'm only going to post the totals of the columns in my debtors control account, the totals of the debtors column in the sales journal or in the cash book receipts journal or whatever is being posted to the control account, where the detail is being posted into the individual debtors account. At the end of the day, it must give me exactly the same answer. There's the detail, here's the summarized version, but the total, the end result must be exactly the same. Good. Now we have sold on credit. Remember, debtors control is only about credit sales. Debiteurskontrole gaan slegs oor kredietverkope. Now watch out here. Let me just go back one step, tell you where the pitfalls are. If I give you, for instance, the sales column of the debtors journal, what is reflected in the sales column of the debtors journal? Only the amount that's been posted to the sales account in the general ledger, not the amount that's been posted to the debtors in the general ledger. What do we post to the debtors in the general ledger? The value of the invoice. So that will be the VAT inclusive amount. If there's allowance for settlement discounts, my sales would be now exclusive of that and exclusive of the settlement discount. So if I give you the total of the sales column, I must work back to the VAT exclusive amount, and then I must work back to the VAT inclusive amount, and the VAT inclusive amount is being reflected in the debtors control account. So you cannot take the sales columns total and say that that is the amount posted to the debtors control account. You have to rework that total a little bit. As ek vir jou die verkoopskolom se totaal van die debiteure joernaal gegee het en ek vra vir jou die debiteure kontrolerekening, dan is daai verkoopskolom nie die bedrag wat na die debiteurs kontrolerekening toe gaan nie. Daai verkoopskolom se totaal gaan na die verkoperrekening toe in die algemene grootboek. Wat verteenwoordig daardie totaal van die verkoperkolom? Hy verteenwoordig die BTW uitgesluite verkope. En as daar 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting op daardie transaksie gemaak is, dan sluit dit die vereffeningskorting gedeelte van die BTW uitgeslote faktuurbedrag ook uit. So as ek vir jou dan die verkopekolom se totaal gegee het, dan moet jy eers van daar af terugwerk na die BTW uitgesluite bedrag. En dan moet jy die BTW gaan bytel en dan eers het jy die totaal wat na die debiteurskontrolerekeninge gepos is as kredietverkope vir die maand. Want in my debiteurskontrolerekening stel ek die faktuurwaarde te boek. That is so important, guys. In the debtors control account on the debit side, I record the value of the invoice issued to the debtor. And that is a VAT inclusive amount. Okay, nou is ons terug by kredietverliese. Nou het ek op skuld aan iemand iets verkoop en nou sukkel ek om my geld van hom af te kry. So credit losses is I've sold and credit to somebody and I battle to get my money out of it. Now, when am I going to write off that outstanding amount as a credit loss? I will only write it off if there is concrete evidence without any uncertainty that I will not collect my money. So ek gaan slegs 'n uitstaande skuld as 'n kredietverlies afskryf as daar konkrete bewyse bestaan, geen onsekerheid is dat ek ooit my geld gaan kry nie. Dan eers skryf ek sy skuld af. Want onthou, sodra ek daai debiteur afgeskryf het, het ek hom uit my boeke uitgevee en ek sien nou nooit meer daardie debiteur as 'n uitstaande skuld nie. So ek gaan dit ook nie opvolg nie. So guys, it's important to remember, once I've written off a certain debt, that debtor will disappear from the radar screen. I will not see that debtor anymore. So obviously I'm not going to follow up on any outstanding amounts from that guy anymore. So that is why it is so absolutely important that there must be concrete evidence that I will never going to collect my outstanding debt. Now, what is our journal entry when we write off a debt? We will debit credit losses, which is an expense account with a VAT exclusive amount. The receipt of revenue said, when you made the sales transaction, what did you do? You actually raised VAT of the VAT on the invoice you paid over to me as VAT output. It says you didn't collect the money, so you never realized that money from the debtor. So when you're going to write off that outstanding debt, you can claim the VAT included in that debt that you're going to write off, you can claim it back from me. So to our credit losses expense account will only be debited the VAT exclusive amount of the debt we're going to write off. Then we can claim the VAT on that debt, and we're going to credit our debtors control account with a full amount of the debt we're going to write off. And then obviously we're going to credit the debtors individual account in the debtors ledger as well to take that outstanding amount out of the books. So dames en here, wanneer ek 100% seker is ek gaan nooit my geld kry nie, dan skryf ek daardie verlies af. Ek debiteer kredietverliese wat 'n uitgawerekening is in die staat van wins en verlies. Die ontvanger van inkomste sê toe jy oorspronklik die verkooptransaksie te boek gestel het jy aan my die BTW op die faktuur oorbetaal. Hy sê maar jy het nooit daardie faktuur se geld gevorder nie. Daarom laat ek jou toe wanneer jy dan hierdie uitstaande skuld gaan afskryf, dat jy die BTW wat ingesluit is in daardie uitstaande skuld by my terugeis. So na met die kredietverliese uitgawerekening gaan slegs die BTW uitgesluite bedrag. Dan die BTW inset kan jy eis, so dit is dan die BTW op daardie kredietverlies en ek gaan my debiteurskontrolerekening krediteer met die volle bedrag van die skuld wat ek gaan afskryf. En dan natuurlik moet die debiteur se individuele rekening in die debiteur grootboek ook afgeskryf word, sodat daardie debiteur dan van my radarskerm af verdwyn en sodat my debiteure lys en my debiteure kontrolerekening weer met mekaar kan balanseer. If I do not write off the debtor's individual debt in the debtor's ledger, my debtor's control account and my total of my debtor's list will never reconcile. So therefore, I also have to adjust his account and write off that outstanding debt in his individual account as well, so that my control account and my debtor's list can reconcile with each other. Good, then I get something that I call credit losses recovered. Ek kry iets soos kredietverliese verhaal. Nou wat is dit nou? Dames en here, ek het 'n jaar terug hierdie ou se uitstaande skuld afgeskryf. So hy bestaan nie meer in my boeke nie, die debiteur is verwyder uit my boeke uit. En surprise, surprise, hier kom toe nou 'n paar rand uit die bloute uit en die ouetjie betaal my toe. So hy geweet het hom gery en toe betaal hy my 'n sekere bedragie. Now, what do not know? Guys, so what happened is last year, I was 100% convinced that I will never recover my money from this specific debtor. And then, surprise, surprise, somewhere during the course of the current financial year, this guy's conscience actually moved him towards paying me a certain amount of money. Now, I've written off his outstanding debt, so I don't have a debtor in my books anymore. So I cannot debit bank and credit the debtors account because I don't have a debtors account anymore. So what do I do now? I don't have any outstanding debtors balances because it was written off. Ek het geen uitstaande debiteure saldo nie want dit is voorheen afgeskryf. I'm going to debit my bank account with the amount received. Ek gaan my bankrekening debiteer met die bedrag wat ek ontvang het. And then I'm going to credit an income account. Credit losses recovered. Ek gaan 'n inkomste rekening krediteer, kredietverliese verhaal. And included in this amount that I've received, the VAT portion included in that amount will now be paid over to the receiver of revenue as VAT output. So ingesluit in hierdie bedrag wat ek ontvang het, gaan ek die BTW gedeelte wat in daardie bedrag ingesluit is, nou moet oorbetaal aan die ontvanger van inkomste as BTW uitset. Onthou toe ek die skuld afgeskryf het, het ek die volle BTW inset geëis op die bedrag wat ek afgeskryf het. Maar nou het ek 'n sekere gedeelte van daai skuld verhaal. So nou moet ek weer die ontvanger sy gedeelte teruggee. Dit is hoekom die BTW uitset is. When I wrote off the debt initially, what did I do? I claimed the VAT on the credit loss that I've written off. Now I have recovered a certain portion of that credit loss, and now I have to give the receiver of revenue once more that portion that belongs to him back by ways of the VAT output that I'm going to raise. Remember the golden rule. Never, ever, ever, ever will an income or expense item include VAT. Credit losses recovered is an income item. Kredietverliese verhaal is 'n inkomste item. So dit moet altyd uitgesluit van BTW wees. Good, now we come to the new, and that's the allowance for credit losses. Wat is die toelaag vir kredietverliese nou? Dames en here, ek is nie 100% seker dat hierdie skuld gaan sleg word nie, maar ek het hierdie snaakse gevoel in my binneste dat ek gaan nie my geld kry nie. En dis nie net sommer 'n gevoel waarmee ek opstaan een oggend nie. Daar is sekere gebeurtenisse wat aanleiding gee dat ek hierdie gevoel ontwikkel oor tyd. Goed soos gerugte in die mark. Goed soos as ek die ou bel kry, kom nie in die hande nie. Goed soos dat die ou hy dak en dive. Ek weet net nie wat daar aangaan nie. So hierdie debiteur raak nou regtig waar, soos die Engelsman sal sê, 'n dark horse vir my. Ek weet nie wat daar aangaan nie. Guys, when I have an uncertainty, here's somewhere a gut feel that this guy is not going to repay his outstanding debt. Now, this gut feel is not something that I stand up with one morning. That is something that develops over time. I cannot get hold of this debtor. I can phone all the numbers that I have with this guy. He just never answers his phone. Or if he does answer his phone, I get all kinds of promises, but he never keeps his promises. Yes, I will pay you tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes tomorrow, and tomorrow becomes tomorrow, and tomorrow becomes tomorrow, and it just never happens. He ducks and dives. I really battle to get hold of him. I battle to get any reaction from his side. I only get promises that he will pay his debt, but nothing happens. There's also maybe rumors in the marketplace that I really battle. I know for a fact maybe that he's experiencing cash flow problems, and instead of coming to me and come to some kind of agreement what he should do, what he should not do, he just disappears in thin air. So there is great uncertainty whether his debt will be collected. So daar bestaan groot onsekerheid by my of ek uitstaande skuld gaan vorder. Now remember what happens at year end. I have to compile a set of financial statements. And you've seen now, you think back about the conceptual framework, these words faithful representation pops up every now and then. Hierdie woorde getroue weergawe in die konseptuele raamwerk is iets wat aan mekaar na vore kom. En wanneer ek dan finansiële state gaan opstel, moet ek seker maak dat my finansiële state 'n getroue weergawe is van wat in my finansiële state aangaan. So I must make 100% sure that my financial statements is a faithful representation of the actual events that happened. Now, if there's such a great uncertainty that this guy is going to pay me, is ek so baie onseker as ek my geld gaan vorder, is it then correct to show that full outstanding debt as an asset in my books? A debtor is an asset. So what does an asset do? An asset increases my equity value. What is equity? That is wealth. So should I show a debt or an asset which does not really exist? Moet ek 'n bate in my boeke gaan toon wat nie regtig bestaan nie? And the answer in big capital letters is no, I should not do that. En dan sê ek maar, ja, listen, I don't want to write off this debt because as soon as I write off the debt, this guy is going to disappear from my radar screen. I'm not going to phone him now anymore 5 times a day and ask where's my money. I'm not going to chase that money. And that is not something that I want either because I think there's still a chance that I can get my money. So ek gaan nie die ou se skuld afskryf nie, want sodra ek dit afskryf, dan verdwyn hy uit my boeke uit as 'n debiteur. Nou bel ek hom nie meer 5000 keer op 'n dag en sê hoorie, so waar's my geld nie. Ek jaag hom nie meer om my geld te kry nie. So daar bestaan tog definitief 'n moontlikheid dat ek my geld gaan kry. Ek dink net die moontlikheid raak al hoe meer en meer onseker. So ek wil nie die skuld afskryf nie, maar ek wil tog hê dat my finansiële state omsigtig opgestel moet wees. So I don't want to write off the debt, but I want my financial statements to be prudent. So what I do now is I leave that debtor in my books. Ek los daai debiteur in my boek. Maar ek gaan skep 'n toelaag vir kredietverliese. I leave my debtor, but I go and create an allowance for a credit loss. What is an allowance for credit losses? It is a negative asset. 'n Toelaag vir kredietverliese is 'n negatiewe bate. It's not a liability. It's not equity. Dis 'n negatiewe bate. Dis nie 'n las nie, dis ook nie ekwiteit nie. Dis 'n negatiewe bate. So wat is die inskrywing wat ek hier deur my boeke gaan sit? Ek debiteer 'n uitgawerekening. Credit losses with a VAT exclusive amount. I debit an expense account credit losses with a VAT exclusive amount. And I credit allowance for credit losses with that same amount. Why the VAT exclusive amount? So as jy ou my R10,000 geskuld het, dan sê ek gaan nie 'n toelaag skep vir R10,000 nie. Ek gaan 'n toelaag skep vir R10,000 gedeel deur 1.15 wat 8696 is. I'm not going to create an allowance for the full outstanding amount, only for the VAT exclusive amount. If you owe me R10,000, I'm going to create an allowance for 8696, 10,000 divided by 1.15. Why? Because let's say that this debt is going to be bad, and I'm eventually going to write off the debt. What is going to happen with the VAT portion included in the outstanding debt? I'm going to collect the VAT portion from the receiver of revenue as VAT input. So the VAT portion of the debt is never going to come out of my own pocket. That is going to come out of the receiver of revenue's pocket. Therefore, it's not a loss for me. Therefore, my allowance account will be equal to the VAT exclusive portion of the credit losses that I want that is doubtful. So dames en here, die gedeelte van daardie uitstaande skuld wat op die einde van die dag uit my gatsak uit gaan kom, gaan nie die hele skuld wees nie. Dit gaan die hele skuld wees nadat die ontvanger die BTW gedeelte aan my teruggegee het. So daaroor gaan net die BTW uitgesluite gedeelte van die uitstaande skuld uit my gatsak uitkom. Die res gaan ek verhaal van die ontvanger en daaroor gaan die toelaag vir kredietverliese gelykstaande wees aan die BTW uitgesluite gedeelte van die uitstaande skuld. Yes, Mr. van der Merwe, what is your question?
Jammer mevrou, ek weet nie of mevrou hier gaan uitkom nie. Maar ek weet nie of dalk 'n stupid vraag is nie, maar kom ons nou.
Yes.
Jy het nou 'n krediet, jy het nou 'n toelaag vir kredietverlies, ek reken nou geskep het op 'n krediet nou.
Ja.
Kom ons sê nou die ou se skuld is nou op die einde afgeskryf uit regtig en sy skuld betaal nie.
Ja.
Moet jy dan weer kredietverliese skryf of kan jy net hierdie keer die kredietverliese toelaag vir kredietverliese debit?
Ja, jy kan. Okay, sy vraag is wat gebeur nou? Ek het hierdie toelaag geskep en die ou se skuld word daarna dan werklik afgeskryf. Nou dames en here, wat ek dan gaan doen is, en as dit net een persoon is, daai Hockenheim voorbeeld van julle, het ek Verstappen se skuld gaan afskryf, onthou julle. En nadat ek die kredietverlies geskep het. So wat het ek toe gedoen? Toe ek sy skuld gaan afskryf het ek die toelaag vir kredietverliese gedebiteer. Ek het debiteure gekrediteer met die 8696, met ander woorde BTW uitgesluite gedeelte. Dan het ek BTW inset gedebiteer en die debiteure gekrediteer met die BTW gedeelte van die verlies van die uitstaande skuld wat ek dan afskryf. So wat gebeur dan? Dan is my toelaag vir kredietverliese 0. My BTW inset is die bedrag wat ek gaan eis op die kredietverlies. Hierso toe ek die toelaag geskep het ek al reeds die uitgawerekening in my boeke ingeneem, so ek neem hom nie weer 'n keer in nie. So as ek dit dan doen, is my toelaagrekening skoon, my uitgawerekening was in elk geval die vorige jaar al reg, my debiteure is skoon en my BTW inset kan ek dan gaan eis. So for the English guys, his question is, let's assume that now, after I've created this allowance for credit losses, this guy goes belly up and I'm really going to write off the credit loss. So what am I going to do then? Now, what I'm going to do then is I will debit the allowance for credit losses with the amount that's lying here, and I will credit the debtors account with that amount. Now, if you can remember, this is only the VAT exclusive amount. The debtors balance is the VAT inclusive amount. So now I'm going to add the VAT to this amount, and I will credit the debtors account with a VAT on this amount. So then I will come back to the invoice value. The debit side of that entry will be then VAT input. So that would be the VAT I can claim on the credit loss that I'm going to write off. So my VAT input account will then be the VAT on the debt that I have written off. My allowance for credit losses account would be 0 because I've debited this account, and my debtors account would be 0. There would have been 2 entries on the credit side of my debtors account. One will be the VAT exclusive portion of the outstanding debt coming from this account, and one will be the VAT input that the counter leg is lying in the VAT input account. Het jy meneer van der Merwe?
Ja, baie dankie mevrou.
Okay, it's an important question. Now, that leads to another dilemma that we have. You will see if we are only going to create our allowance for credit losses on a specific debtor, then when you're going to write off that debt, you can utilize your allowance for credit losses. Nou hierdie voorbeeld wat ek nou gegee het, is waar ons 'n toelaag vir kredietverliese op 'n spesifieke debiteur gaan skep het. Maar as jy na jou handboek toe gaan, daar is het ek vir jou baie mooi, ek het daai hoofstuk geskryf, so ek weet presies wat daar aangaan. Daar wys ek vir jou baie mooi, maar wat gebeur nou as ek 'n toelaag vir kredietverliese gaan skep, omdat daar 'n tendens in die verlede was dat 'n sekere gedeelte van my debiteure nooit hulle uitstaande skuld vereffen nie. So in your textbook, I explained to you very clearly what happens if that statistics of the past shows me that it is the tendency that, let's say, 5% of all outstanding debtors will never settle their outstanding balances. So I will never collect that balances. So I have gone into the history of the past, and I've seen, well, in year 1, outstanding balance was 100. What did I collect of that 100 in year 2? Only 95 Rand. And in year 2, I've done the same. In year 3, I've done the same. And so I've gathered all the information and came to the conclusion that I always only collect 95% of outstanding debt. Now, what an entity can do now is he can make an allowance for credit losses policy. And then when he creates this policy, he can say, well, based on my experience of the past, I will now create an allowance for credit losses every year equal to 5% of my outstanding debtors. Ek nou net vir die Afrikaanse ouens verduidelik. Die onderneming het gegaan en hy het gaan statistiek uithaal in die verlede. Daai statistiek het ek gesien in jaar 1 was vir uitstaande debiteure R100 en ek het net R95 gekry. En so het hy jaar 2 uitgehaal, wat was die uitstaande bedrag en hoeveel het ek die volgende jaar ingevorder? In jaar 3 en jaar 4 en jaar 5. Dis sien dan by my magistraat, ek vorder elke jaar net 95% van my uitstaande debiteure skuld soos op jaareinde in. Toe gaan die onderneming toe sê, maar nou maak ek 'n beleid vir die skep van 'n toelaag vir 'n kredietverlies. Hy sê, en my beleid is om elke jaar 5% van my uitstaande debiteure saldo te skep as 'n toelaag vir kredietverliese. So wat ek nou gaan doen is ek vat my uitstaande debiteure saldo, soos op jaareinde, ek haal die BTW uit en ek maal dit maal 5%, en dit is dan die waarde van die toelaag wat ek gaan skep aan die einde van elke finansiële jaar. So English guys, once I make this a policy to create an allowance for credit losses of 5% of my outstanding debtors balance at the end of each financial year, I will take my outstanding debtors balance at the end of the year. I will take out the VAT divided by 1.15 and I will multiply that figure by 5%. And that is the amount that I want as the allowance for credit losses balance at the end of the year. Now, there's something important I want to say. Yes, when I'm actually going to write off a credit losses in the next financial period, I will not do that write-off against the allowance account, but then my journal entry will be debit credit losses expense account, debit VAT input, credit my outstanding debtors. Wanneer ek nou werklik kredietverliese gaan afskryf in hierdie scenario wat ek nou aan jou geskets het, dan gaan ek nie daai kredietverliese teen my toelaagrekening afskryf, soos wat ek deur die volgende finansiële jare kredietverliese gaan afskryf nie. Wat ek dan gaan doen is ek gaan my uitgawerekening kredietverliese debiteer, ek gaan BTW inset debiteer en ek gaan my debiteer wat ek gaan afskryf krediteer met die uitstaande skuld wat ek dan afskryf. Aan die einde van die finansiële jaar gaan ek hierdie toelaagrekening weer aanpas na 5% van uitstaande debiteure toe. At the end of that financial period, I will adjust my allowance for credit losses accounts balance again to 5% of outstanding debtors. And the counter leg of this adjustment entry, die teenbeen van hierdie regstellingsinskrywe, will go against my credit losses expense account. Gaan teen my kredietverliese uitgawerekening geskep. En ek gaan vir jou nou 'n voorbeeld gee dat ek vir jou wys hoe werk dit. Dames en here, laat ek vir jou 'n groot voorbeeld in jou handboek gegee waar dit presies dieselfde eindresultaat lewer as waar ek die toelaag sou deur die jaar gebruik het en hom dan op jaareinde in elk geval weer geaanpas het na 5% van uitstaande debiteure. So in your textbook, I explained to you that the end result of this entry, as I've explained now, is exactly the same as what it should have been if I did take my credit losses that I've written off during the financial period and wrote it off against my allowance account. It is just much easier to keep your allowance account then in place until the end of the financial year and then do the adjustment entry. And if I write off credit losses during the year, I'm going to do it against my credit losses expense account, my VAT account, and my debtors account. Dis net baie makliker om net deur die jaar met my toelaagrekening te sukkel in hierdie geval waar ek 'n algehele persentasie voorsien op 'n jaarlikse basis nie, maar wanneer ek dit dan deur die jaar doen, net teen my uitgawerekening, my BTW en my debiteure doen en my toelaagrekening los en hom slegs aansuiwer aan die einde van die jaar. Dit maak die lewe vir almal baie makliker. Kom ek wys vir jou 'n voorbeeld. Let me show you an example. History has shown that only 95% of outstanding debtors balances are collected on an annual basis. Therefore, the company introduced a policy of allowance accounts and make an allowance for credit losses at the rate of 5% of outstanding balances per annum as from 31 December 24. Assume a VAT rate of 15%. Geskiedenis toon dat slegs 95% van uitstaande debiteure op 'n jaarlikse basis ingevorder word. Om die rede het die onderneming besluit om jaarlikse toelaag vir kredietverliese te skep teen 5% van uitstaande debiteure vanaf 31 Desember 2004. Die BTW is 15%. Nou hier gee vir my handelsdebiteure se saldo. Sy sê aan die einde van 2004 was dit 60.800 en aan die einde van 2005 was dit 54.700. They gave me my outstanding debtors balances. At the end of 24, it was 60,800, and at the end of 25, it was 54,700. So the journal that we are going to pass in 24, they only started in 24 with this policy, so there is no allowance for credit losses in the books. This is going to be the first year that I'm going to create this allowance. So what is going to be the amount of the allowance? Dames en here, ek het nooit voorheen hierdie beleid gehad nie. Hy het eers op 2004 ingeskop, so daar is geen toelaag vir kredietverliese rekeninge tans in my boeke nie. So hoe gaan ek bereken wat is my toelaag vir kredietverliese aan die einde van 2004? Ek vat my uitstaande skuld 60.800, ek haal die BTW uit en ek maal hom met 5%. En dis die toelaag wat ek wil hê aan die einde van 2004. How do I determine the allowance account balance at the end of 24? I take my debtors account balance of 60,800, I take out the VAT and I multiply that by 5%. And that is the balance I want in my allowance for credit losses account at the end of 24. So what is the journal entry that I'm going to pass? I'm going to debit credit losses and expense account, statement of profit or loss of 2644. And I'm going to create an allowance for credit losses statement of financial position account 2644. Now, I know that at school they've told you to use an adjustment for credit losses. Please don't use the word bad debts because I will not mark that entry. Adjustment for credit losses account as the expense account here, I'm fine with the adjustment for credit losses account instead of the credit losses account as well. So wat is die joernaal-inskrywing wat ek deursit? Ek debiteer 'n kredietverliese rekening staat van wins of verlies soos 'n uitgawe rekening met daardie 2644. Ek krediteer my toelaag vir kredietverliese rekening staat van finansiële posisie met 2644. Ek weet op skool het julle geleer, dis iets soos 'n aansuiwering vir kredietverliese rekeninge, wat jy gedebiteer het in jou inkomste staat. Ek is fyn daarmee, moet dit net nie slegte skulde noem nie, want ek sal nie slegte skulde merk nie. Maar as jy dit 'n aansuiweringsrekening of 'n kredietverliese aanpassingsrekening of wat jy ook al iets in die voege wil noem, ek is fyn daarmee. As jy dit, solank dit 'n uitgawe rekening is wat jy debiteer, is ek heeltemal alright daarmee, so jy kan dit maar so noem. Of die uitgawe rekening kredietverliese of 'n aanpassing vir kredietverliese toelaagrekening 2644. Either the expense account credit losses or an adjustment for allowance for credit losses account, which is an expense account of 2644. How does the disclosure look? Guys, we're busy with financial accounting, so it's all about disclosure. So you should know how disclosure looks like. In the statement of financial position, you'll have the name of the entity, statement of financial position as of 3 December, this must be 24. Oops. Just move around all this stuff. Slideshow, current slide. There you are. And just move this back. The name of the entity, statement of financial position as of 31 December 24. Openbaarmaking die naam van die entiteit op sy eie lyn item. Hy word nie daar aangevoeder nie, hy staan op sy eie. Staat van finansiële posisie soos dit 31 Desember 2004, 2004-2003. Onthou jy die konseptuele raamwerk het gesê, ek moet vergelykende syfers gee. Daar moet eintlik nog staan rand op onder dit. Then under current assets, trade receivables. This is my note number 6 and an amount. 23, I don't know what the comparative figure was, so I just put in crosses. Onder bedryfsbates, daar's my aantekening nommer 6, 'n bedrag, en vir 23 weet ek nie wat die vergelykende syfer nie, so ek sit net kruisies. Dan my aantekeninge tot die finansiële state. In my notes to the financial statements, once more the name of the entity on its own line item. You don't put it in this line item here, it has its own line. Notes to the financial statements as of 31 December 24. Trade receivables, 24. Trade debtors, 60,800. There it was, 60,800. Here was our allowance for credit losses, 2644. That gives us net trade debtors, 58,156. So there we only record the 58,156. Afrikaanse ouens, handelsdebiteure aantekening 658,156. Hier is my aantekeninge tot die finansiële state. Weer eens staan die naam van die onderneming in sy eie lyn item. Hier is nota 6 wat daarmee ooreenstem. Handelsdebiteure 2024-3. Handelsdebiteure 60,800. Dit was die bedrag wat ons daar gehad het, 60,800. Daar is die toelaag wat geskep is, 2644. Netto handelsdebiteure 58,156, so dis daai 58,156. Can you see why the allowance for credit losses is a negative asset? Kan jy sien kom is die toelaag vir kredietverliese 'n negatiewe bate? Because it reduces the value of my asset called debtors. Dit verminder die waarde van my bate genaamd debiteure. Goed, nou is die volgende jaar. Kom ons kyk net hoe lyk ons toelaag vir kredietverliese rekening. Let's just have a look how our T account allowance for credit losses looks. In the beginning of the next year, 25, that will have a balance of 2644. This is the balance that we have created with this journal entry that we have passed here, that 2644. So daar is die saldo wat ons hier geskep het vir my toelaagrekening aan die einde van 24/2644. Aan die einde van 25 is my uitstaande debiteure syfer 54,700. At the end of 25, my outstanding debtors figure is 54,700, and again I have to create an allowance for credit losses equal to 5% of outstanding debtors. So ek moet weer 'n toelaag gaan skep gelykstaande aan 5% van my uitstaande debiteure. So let's do our calculation. We take the 54,700, we take out the VAT, we multiply that by 5%, and we say, well, at the end of 25, we would like an allowance account for credit losses with a balance of 2378. So ons doen die berekening, ons vat ons debiteure, ons haal die BTW uit, ons maal dit met 5% en dit gee vir ons 2378. So ons sê vir onsself aan die einde van 25 wil ons 'n toelaag in ons boeke hê vir kredietverliese van 2378. Going back to this account here, we have an allowance account in our books. Remember, assets and liabilities and equity balances are carried forward to the next financial period. Bates, laste en ekwiteitrekeninge se saldos word oorgedra na die volgende finansiële tydperk toe. So ons sit met 'n toelaagrekening wat 'n saldo het van 2644. Daai saldo wil ons nou hê, moet gelykstaande wees aan 2378. We want that balance to become 2378 at the end of 2005. So that means we need a debit entry in this account. Ons het 'n debit in hierdie rekening nodig van 266. As ons dan die rekening afbalanseer, dan daar is ons sluitingssaldo van 2378, dis die saldo wat ons wil hê. If we're going to balance off this account, there is our closing balance of 2378. That is the balance that we want in this account at the end of the year. So what do we do with the 268? We take it to our credit losses account. So we are going to debit now. You can see clearly there, I debit the allowance for credit losses. Ek debiteer die toelaag vir kredietverliese met R266. And I credit losses account in the income statement. So this now becomes an income item. Or I can credit my adjustment for credit losses account, adjustment for allowance for credit losses account 266. But that will become an income item in my statement of profit or loss. So daai kredietverliese gaan nou 'n inkomste rekening wees in my staat van wins en verlies van R266. Let's assume next year that the balance that we want in our allowance for credit losses account is going to be R2,500. What do I do then? Then I need a credit in this account once more. Do you agree? So then the difference between 2,500 and 2,378 is R122. So then I will credit my allowance for credit losses account with R122 to get to a total of 2,500, and I will debit credit losses again with R122. So this entry can sweep around. It can either be debit the allowance account and credit the credit losses account, or it can be like we've done in the first one, debit the credit losses account and credit the allowance account. So depending what we want in years hereafter, that will depend whether this is going to be a debit or credit and this is going to be a debit or credit. So dames en here, hierdie joernaal hierso kan of 'n debit of 'n credit wees, dit hang af wat wil ek in hierdie rekening hê. As ek in hierdie rekening 'n credit wil hê, dan gaan my kredietverliese 'n debit wees. As ek in hierdie rekening 'n debit wil hê, dan gaan my kredietverliese 'n krediet wees. So hy kan albei kante toe swaai. Jy moet gaan trek hierdie teerekeningkie vir jou as jy hierdie berekening gaan doen om seker te maak jy maak nie 'n fout nie. Openbaarmaking. Now, in our disclosure again, we will show in 25 our outstanding trade debtors, which was 54,700 in our notes, trade debtors, and then we're going to subtract the new balance that we want for our allowance account, the 2,378. So that we're going to subtract from our outstanding debtors balance, and that will give us net trade debtors of 52,322, the figure that will appear next to trade receivables on the face of the statement of financial position. Yes, last year's figures, I have to give comparative figures according to the conceptual framework. So here's my comparative figures, which I have now, and I can insert it in my statement of financial position. So my staat finansiële posisie, hier is my aantekening oor handelsdebiteure. In die huidige jaar was die uitstaande debiteure saldo 54,700. My toelaag vir kredietverliese is 2,378. Dis my nuwe saldo wat ek daar geskep het. So my netto handelsdebiteure is 5,2322. Dis daai 5,2322. Ek het my vergelykende syfers, so ek kan dit nou ook gaan insit onder daardie items. Guys, do you understand this? Are there any questions now regarding this issue? Great stuff. Nou kom ons by kortings. Nou, kortings moet jy mooi kop pak. Ja. Somebody wants to ask a question. Discounts.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm listening.
Ma'am, I remember you said on the ding dong.
On what?
The ding dong homework you had to do.
That question until the end.
Okay.
Discounts.
Yes.
Discount. What is a cash discount? Cash discount is item normally costs R100. I'm going to pay in cash for that, so I'm only going to pay R95 for that. Because I'm going to pay over the counter, I'm going to give the guy his money immediately. He says, because you're going to give me immediately the money, I only take R95. What is the source document for a cash transaction, guys? It's either cash invoice or cash register slip. What will appear on the cash register slip? Only the R95, not the R100. What? Why? Because that's the amount that I received. Wat gaan op die kontantfaktuur verskyn? What's going to appear on the cash invoice? Only the amount received, R95. So vir kontantkortings, wat verskyn op die brondokument? Wat is die brondokument? Of 'n kontantfaktuur of die kasregisterstrokie? Wat gaan op die kasregisterstrokie verskyn as die totale bedrag van hierdie transaksie? R95, nie R100. En op die kontantfaktuur ook R95, nie R100. So, what is a position with a trade discount? What is trade discount? A trade discount is I negotiate with you a special price. 'n Handelskorting is ek onderhandel met jou 'n spesiale prys vir die goed wat ek aankoop. So teen watter waarde gaan die faktuur uitgereik word? Teen die bedrag wat ek onderhandel het. At what value will the invoice be issued at? At the amount what the invoice of the amount that we have negotiated. So the invoice amount will be the negotiated amount for the goods that I've sold. Now, what is a settlement discount? A settlement discount has no impact on the invoice value, but it says, if you settle this account within a certain time period, you do not have to repay me 100% of the invoice value. You can deduct a certain percentage of the invoice value as a settlement discount and just pay me the remainder of the invoice amount. So if the settlement discount is 5% and the outstanding invoice is 100, he says, if you pay me within 10 days, you only need to pay me 95 Rand and we will forget about the other 5 Rand of the invoice. So what do we pay? We pay 95% of the outstanding invoice value. What was the invoice value? 100 Rand. That didn't change. The invoice value was 100 Rand. With a settlement discount, I just don't pay the full 100 Rand. So wat is 'n vereffeningskorting? 'n Vereffeningskorting sê, dit het niks met die faktuurwaarde te doen nie. Dit gaan oor die betaling van die faktuur. En as jy daardie faktuur binne 'n sekere tydsraamwerk betaal, dan hoef jy nie die volle faktuurbedrag te betaal nie. Jy kan dan slegs 'n persentasie van die faktuurbedrag betaal. As die kredietterme is dat jy, as jy binne 10 dae betaal, kan jy 5% vereffeningskorting vat. En die uitstaande faktuurbedrag is R100 en ek betaal op die 8ste dag, dan gaan ek nie R100 betaal nie, ek gaan R95 betaal. En die onderneming gaan vir jou sê, vergeet die ander R5, want omdat jy vir my daardie faktuur binne die eerste 10 dae betaal het, hoef jy my net R95 te betaal het. Dames en here, het die faktuurbedrag verander? Nee, die faktuurbedrag is steeds R100. Ek het net R95 betaal op daardie R100. So nou moet ek net die ander R5 gaan afskryf. En wat is daardie ander R5? Dis 'n korting. Waarteen gaan hy? As ons BTW uit die prentjie uitlaat, dan gaan hy verkope toe. If I owe you R100 and I only paid R95, I have to clean out this R100 out of your account. Where will I take that additional R5 to? It will be part of sales. If we ignore that in that whole situation, it will be sales. Okay. So important, the principle involved. The invoice value will always be after cash and trade discounts have already been deducted. So cash discount, the invoice value will already have deducted the cash discount. A trade discount, the invoice value will always have deducted the trade discount already. Both of them, however, will include VAT. So die faktuurwaarde waar 'n kontantkorting gegee is, sal daardie faktuurwaarde wees nadat die kontantkorting alreeds afgetrek is. Die faktuurwaarde waar 'n handelskorting gegee is, sal die faktuurwaarde wees nadat die handelskorting alreeds afgetrek is. Maar in beide van hulle sal die faktuurwaarde altyd BTW insluit. Good, let's talk about settlement discounts some more. Let's assume that the credit terms is 5, 15 and 30. Die kredietterme is 5, 15 en 30 en nou moet jy weet wat dit beteken. You must know what this means. What does it mean? It means that a guy can get a 5% settlement discount if he settles his account within 15 days after the invoice date. Beteken die ou gaan 5% vereffeningskorting kry as hy hierdie faktuur betaal 15 dae na die faktuurdatum. Hy het egter in totaal 30 dae tyd om daardie faktuur te betaal. In total he has 30 days to settle that invoice. most probably from day 31 onwards is going to be charged with interest. Heel waarskynlik gaan hy na 30 dae rentes gevra word. Settlement discount, that 5% does not alter the invoice amount, but only kicks in when an invoice is paid. Daardie kredietkorting of daardie kredietkorting, nie kredietkorting nie, 'n vereffeningskorting van 5% verander nie die faktuurwaarde nie. En dit skop slegs in wanneer betaling van die faktuur plaasvind. If he pays within the settlement period, he utilizes the discount, the settlement discount, and he will only pay me 95% of the invoice value. Indien die faktuur binne die vereffeningsperiode of die vereffeningstydperk, dis die 15 dae is die vereffeningstydperk. But the settlement period is the 15 days. So as hy binne die 15 dae gaan betaal, dan gaan hy my nie 100% van die faktuurwaarde betaal nie, maar hy gaan maar slegs 95% van die faktuurwaarde betaal. So hy benut dan die korting. As hy 16 dae vat om my te betaal, dan het die vereffeningstydperk verstryk en is hy nie meer geregtig op enige vereffeningskortings nie en moet hy my 100% van die uitstaande faktuurbedrag betaal. If this guy pays me after 16 days of the invoice date, the settlement period has expired and he is no longer able to utilize the 5% settlement discount. Then he has to pay me 100% of the invoice value. An allowance for settlement discount is created in two circumstances. Number one, it must be the policy of the entity to make use of allowance accounts. And there must be an expectation on the side of the entity who does the sales transaction that the client will make use of the settlement discount. So when the sales transaction takes place, you must ask yourself two questions. One, what is the policy of the entity? If the answer is that it is the policy of the entity to make use of allowance accounts, you must ask yourself the second question. And the second question is there an expectation that this customer will pay within the settlement period of 15 days? And if the answer on that is yes as well, then you will make provision for the settlement discount when you record the sales transaction already. So this settlement discount is then recognized upfront when the sales transaction takes place. Dames en here, 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting word geskep wanneer dit die beleid van die onderneming is om van toelaagrekeninge gebruik te maak en daar moet 'n verwagting bestaan by die onderneming dat die klant van die vereffeningskorting gebruik gaan maak. So wanneer 'n verkoopstransaksie plaasvind, is daar twee vrae wat jy jouself moet vra. Die eerste vraag wat jy jouself moet vra is dit die beleid van die onderneming om van toelaagrekeninge gebruik te maak? En as die antwoord ja is, dan vra jy jouself onmiddellik die volgende vraag. Is daar 'n verwagting by die onderneming dat die klant binne die 15 dae, binne die die vereffeningskortingstermyn sy faktuur gaan betaal? En as die antwoord daarop ja is, dan moet ek 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting gaan skep wanneer ek die verkope transaksie in my boeke gaan te boek stel. So in effek beteken dit dan dat ek die vereffeningskorting al gaan erken wanneer die verkoopstransaksie plaasvind. So baie belangrik, beleid van die onderneming en die feit dat daar 'n verwagting moet wees. Very important, the policy of the entity and the fact that there must be an expectation that the client is going to utilize the settlement discount. What steps must we follow when we create an allowance for settlement discount in our books? Watter stappe moet ons volg om 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting in ons boeke te skep? Now, we will only create an allowance for settlement discount when the sales transaction takes place. Ons gaan slegs 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting in ons boeke skep met die verkoopstransaksie wat te boek gestel word. Nou, wat is die stappe? What are the steps? Number 1, determine the invoice amount. Stap nummer 1, bepaal die faktuurbedrag. Step number 2, take out the VAT. Stap nummer 2, haal die BTW uit. Stap nummer 3, step number 3, break down the VAT exclusive amount, the one that you've calculated there, into 2 legs. The settlement discount percentage, let's say it's the 515, which will be then 5%, multiplied by the VAT exclusive amount, the one that I've calculated here. That amount will be taken to the allowance for settlement discount account. The second leg is take the VAT exclusive amount, the one that I've calculated in the first 2 bullets, multiplied by 100% less the settlement discount percentage. So if my settlement discount percentage was 5%, it will be 100 less 5% equals 95%. So 95% multiplied by the VAT exclusive amount, that will be the amount you're going to take to your sales account. Okay. Hoe gaan ek te werk? Bepaal die faktuurbedrag, haal die BTW uit en waarmee los dit my? Met die BTW uitgesluite bedrag. Wat doen ek met die BTW uitgesluite bedrag? Ek breek dit op in 2 bene. Die eerste been, die vereffeningskorting persentasie wat verwag word, moet gebruik word en vermenigvuldig word met die BTW uitgeslote bedrag. As ons nou teruggaan in daai selfde 515 vir die term gebruik, dan gaan my vereffeningskortingspersentasie 5% wees van die BTW uitgesluite bedrag en dit gaan dan wees my toelaag vir vereffeningskorting wat ek moet skep. Tweede beentjie van hierdie een. Ek sê ek breek hom op in 2 bene. Wat is die tweede beentjie? Tweede beentjie is ek vat die BTW uitgeslote bedrag en ek maal hom met 100% minus die vereffeningskorting persentasie. So as my vereffeningskorting persentasie 5% is, dan is dit 100% en 5% is 95%. So 95% van die BTW uitgeslote bedrag, dit gaan na my verkope rekening toe. Kom ons kyk na die joernaalinskrywing. Let's have a look at the journal entry. We will always debit the debtors control account with the invoice value, the full invoice value. Ons sal altyd die debiteurskontrole en die individuele debiteure rekening debiteer met die volle faktuurwaarde van die verkoopstransaksie. We are going to take credit VAT output with the VAT on the invoice, so included in that invoice value. Ek gaan BTW uitset krediteer met die BTW wat ingesluit is in daardie faktuurwaarde. So wat bly nou oor? Nou bly die BTW uitgeslote bedrag oor en nou gaan ons die 2 beentjies te boek stel. Toelaag vir vereffeningskorting is die eerste beentjie wat ons daar uitgewerk het, gaan gekrediteer word en verkope wat die tweede beentjie is wat ons daar uitgewerk het, gaan ook gekrediteer word met daardie 95% van die BTW uitgesluite bedrag. So what are we going to do? We are going to create the allowance for settlement discount account with this leg, that we have calculated here, and that was the settlement discount percentage multiplied by the VAT exclusive amount. And then we're going to credit the sales account with a second bullet that we've calculated here. And that would be the 100% less settlement discount, i.e. let's say it's 5%, will be 95% of the VAT exclusive amount, and that is the amount we're going to post against sales. Please note that the allowance for settlement discount is a statement of financial position account. Why? Why? Let asseblief op dat die toelaag vir vereffeningskorting is 'n staat van finansiële posisie rekening. Hoekom? I'm back at fair representation of my figures. If my outstanding debtor is 100 Rand, but I only expect that he is going to pay 95 Rand because he's going to make use of a settlement discount, I cannot show my outstanding debtor as 100 Rand in my statement of financial position because that is not going to be the amount I'm going to collect from him. I'm only going to collect from him 95 Rand. Therefore, whatever is lying in my allowance for settlement discount account must be subtracted from my outstanding debtors at year end to reflect the amount that I expect to collect from my debtors. Dames en here, ek kan nie my debiteure in my staat van finansiële posisie gaan toon teen R100 as ek net verwag om R95 van die ou af te ontvang, omdat hy van R5 vereffeningskorting gebruik gaan maak nie. Redelike weergawe van die finansiële state vereis dat ek my bate teen 'n redelike waarde moet toon. En daai redelike waarde is nie R100 nie. Dit is net R95, die bedrag wat ek gaan invorder vanaf my kliënt. So my bate is nie R100 werd nie, hy is eintlik net R95 werd. Wat veroorsaak die verskil van R5? Die vereffeningskorting. Daaroor moet my toelaag vir vereffeningskorting afgetrek word van my bruto debiteure op jaareinde om by my netto debiteure syfer uit te kom wat in die staat van finansiële posisie geopenbaar moet word. Goed. What steps needs to be followed when payment takes place? Remember in the first one here, this was when the sales transaction took place. That is when this allowance for settlement discount was created, where my data actually was originated in my books. So die eerste transaksie het gegaan wanneer ja. You know what? You put on your camera and I can see how you're sleeping on your bed. Miss Potolo? Ja. Hierdie eerste transaksie was toe die verkoopstransaksie te boek gestel is, nee. Nou dit is toe die debiteur tot stand gekom het en toe ek die toelaag vir vereffeningskorting geskep het. Maar nou die tweede gedeelte van wat plaasvind is wanneer die debiteur
Is nie jy nie.
betaal.
Want die Lies lê en slaap voor my kamera op haar bed.
Nee, so
When the debtor is going to settle this invoice, what are the steps that I have to take? Number one, determine whether payment takes place in the settlement discount period. If you had 15 days to make use of a 5% settlement discount, does he pay his account within that 15 days period? So die eerste stap is, bepaal of die betaling wat ek ontvang vanaf die kliënt binne die vereffeningstydperk plaasvind. As my kredietterme 5.15 was, dan moet ek my bepaal wanneer ek al geld ontvang van hom, het hy my binne die 15 dae betaal. Hoekom? Want dit gaan bepaal wat is die bedrag wat hy my gaan betaal. So die tweede stap is dan inderdaad bepaal watter bedrag ek van die debiteur gaan ontvang. As hy binne die vereffeningsperiode betaal het, gaan hy my nie die volle bedrag betaal nie. Hy gaan my 100% minus die vereffeningskorting persentasie as dit 5% was, so hy gaan my 95% van die faktuurbedrag betaal. As hy my na die vereffeningsperiode betaal het, so 16 dae en meer na die faktuurdatum my betaal het, dan moet hy my die volle bedrag van die faktuur betaal, want dan het hy die korting verbeur. So met ander woorde, dit gaan dan, hierso is dit belangrik om te bepaal wat is die bedrag wat hy betaal, en die bedrag wat hy betaal gaan afhang of hy binne die vereffeningsperiode gaan betaal, en of hy na die vereffeningsperiode gaan betaal. It is important to determine what amount will be received, and it is important then to see whether he paid me within the settlement period or outside the settlement period. Why? Because if he pays me within the settlement period, let's assume that credit terms of 5.15. If he paid me within 15 days after the invoice date, he would not have paid me 100% of the invoice value. He is only going to pay me 95% of the invoice value. So the amount I'm going to receive from him is not going to be the invoice value, it's going to be 100% less the settlement discount percentage amount. If he pays me after the settlement period has expired, so from 16 days onward, he forfeited the settlement discount. So that means he has to pay me the full invoice amount, so the outstanding debtors balance. Very important. If I haven't determined whether the payment has taken place in the settlement discount period, I would have treated this payment that I've received incorrectly. So what is the journal entry I'm going to pass? Obviously, always in the bank account, I will record the amount that I actually received from the debtor. So I will debit bank with the amount that I've received from the debtor. I'm going to clear the debtors control account when settlement takes place, regardless whether it's going to take place within or without the settlement period. I have to clean out that debtors account. And what is lying in the debtors account? The original invoice value. Now, if the amount that I've received is less than the original invoice value, that means that there is a settlement discount. If I created a settlement discount when the sales transaction took place, I must now clear that settlement discount out of my books. Remember, this allowance for settlement discount expires in two instances. The first instance is when settlement takes place, let's say if settlement takes place within the settlement discount period. The second thing is this allowance for settlement discount will expire when the term of the settlement discount period expires. So from 16 days onward, if he had 15 days to make use of the settlement discount, he can no longer utilize this settlement discount, and then this account becomes redundant. If that happened over year end, it means that this redundant account will not be deducted from my debtors control account balance, but this account will be reversed against my sales account. Very important. Ek sal nou die Afrikaans vir julle verduidelik, is baie belangrik. So, let's assume that he paid within the settlement discount period. So that means that the difference between that amount that he received and the amount that we clear the invoice value out of his own account, this must be debtors control. Oops. Let me just quickly put the English there. Guys, can you still see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
There's a bit of capital, non-capital, it just doesn't matter. So this difference between the amount received, the amount received and the debtors control that I'm going to credit will be represents the settlement discount that he has utilized. But that includes VAT, so the difference between the two must also include VAT. The allowance account would have been for the amount exclusive of VAT. So therefore what I'm going to do here is, if I have created that allowance account initially, I'm just going to take it out of the book. So I must debit that account now. So I'm going to debit the allowance for settlement discount. And then the difference between those two accounts, we've said, is the VAT inclusive amount. So if I take that amount and I divide it by 1.15, that needs to balance back to this account here. And then the VAT included in that difference will be taken to the VAT input account. So that is the VAT on the discount that he has utilized. So if I take this amount here, which is the VAT exclusive amount, and I multiply that by 15%, that will give me the VAT input. So that plus that will equal the difference between those two. Okay, nou luister nou mooi, wat sê die Antie? Wat is die joernaal-inskrywing wat ek maak wanneer ek die geld ontvang? Die eerste ding is, ek gaan my bankrekening debiteer met die werklike bedrag wat ek ontvang het van die debiteur. Ek gaan die debiteurskontrolerekening skoonmaak want ek gaan niks verdere bedrae van hom ontvang nie. En wat lê in die debiteurskontrolerekening? Die faktuurwaarde. So ek gaan die faktuurwaarde gaan ek dan krediteer. Uitstaande skuld was 'n bate, so uit 'n debit saldo, so as ek hom wil skoonmaak, moet ek hom gaan krediteer. Nou as ek by die oorspronklike transaksie, verkoopstransaksie, 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting geskep het, gaan ek nou daardie toelaag uit my boeke uithaal. So daai toelaag vir vereffeningskoste, om hom uit te haal die oorspronklike een uit, gaan ek moet debiteer. Maar kom ons gaan net terug hiernatoe vir 'n oomblik. Wanneer raak hierdie toelaag vir vereffeningskorting nie meer 'n geldige inskrywing nie? Die eerste een is die maklike een en dit is wanneer vereffening van die faktuur plaasvind binne die vereffeningsperiode, soos wat ons nou hier gesien het, en daar het ek hom dan uit my boeke uitgehaal. So, ek het hom hier uit my boeke uitgehaal, so hy bestaan nie meer in my boeke nie, so hy het verval. So hy is nie meer geldig nie, vereffening van die rekening het plaasgevind, daaroor is daai rekening nie meer geldig nie en moet hy uit my boeke uitgehaal word. Maar nou maak 'n groot aantekening iewerste. Kom ons sê, wanneer verval hierdie toelaag ook? Kom ons sê my kredietterme was 5.15. Van die 16de dag af, en die debiteur het nog nie sy rekening betaal nie, kan hy nie meer vir die vereffeningskorting in aanmerking kom nie. So waar die vereffeningsperiode verval het, dan op daardie stadium is hierdie inskrywing nie meer geldig nie en moet ek hom uit my boeke uithaal. So kom ons sê ons is op dag 16 en hierdie debiteur het my nog nie betaal nie. Dan sal ek moet gaan en ek gaan hierdie rekening moet debiteer en die rekening wat ek gaan krediteer gaan verkope wees. So dames en here, daai tweeetjies loop altyd saam. Nou moet jy versigtig wees. Kom ons sê ek sit op die finansiële jaar einde en ek sit met 'n toelaagrekening in my boeke met 'n saldo. Dan is die vraag wat jy vir jouself moet afvra, is daardie saldo wat in die toelaagrekening lê nog steeds 'n geldige saldo? En as die inligting van die vraag vir jou sodanige inligting gee om te bepaal dat daardie toelaag nie meer benut kan word nie, dan moet jy daardie toelaag uit jou boeke uithaal. So jy gaan dan daai toelaag debiteer en jy gaan verkope krediteer. OK. Ek is terug hierso. Wat is die verskil tussen die bedrag wat ek ontvang en die faktuurwaarde? So as ek 'n laer bedrag ontvang as wat die faktuurwaarde is, dan is dit omdat die debiteur die vereffeningskorting benut het. Daardie bedrag sluit BTW in, daardie bedrag sluit BTW in. So die verskil tussen die twee sluit ook BTW in. Die vereffeningskorting wat ek hierso uithaal is 'n BTW uitgeslote bedrag. So met ander woorde, ek het nou vir 'n gedeelte van daai verskil hierso voorsiening gemaak. Al wat ek nou nog moet doen is om die BTW op daardie korting te gaan eis. So wat ook al daai bedrag is, maal 15%, gaan ek na my BTW insetrekening toe vat en dit gaan 'n debit wees die my BTW inset, so dis die BTW op die korting wat ek nou kan eis. Nou as jy moet altyd toets of jou joernaalinskrywing balanseer, so daar's 'n debit en daar's 'n debit en daar's 'n debit en hy moet terugbalanseer na die krediet toe. Kyk mooi, die bedrag wat ek ontvang, plus die BTW uitgesluite korting wat benut is, plus die BTW op daai korting, met ander woorde daai twee saam is my totale korting, waar die verskil is tussen die bedrag ontvang en die faktuurwaarde van die oorspronklike skuld. Now there are other scenarios that you have to consider, and I haven't, there's enough examples in your study unit, and so by the way, I've uploaded all the answers of all the questions in that study unit with videos for you this afternoon. So it is your responsibility, guys, don't be stupid. Try to do the question first on your own. Then watch the video. I would rather say, if you want to save some time, watch the video first. Then Don't look at the answer and try doing the question without a memo for yourself. Then mark your answer against the memo. Then identify where you went wrong. And then you actually discuss and you explain to yourself why you made a mistake and why does the answer look the way it is. Where did you go wrong in the way that you have actually presented your answer opposing to the way it should have been? Nou, julle ouens, luister nou mooi. Ek het al die video's en al die antwoorde van al die vrae in hierdie studie-eenheid vanmiddag vir julle opgelaai. Moenie 'n idioot wees nie. Jy moet gaan kyk as jy wil tyd spaar na die video heeltemal. Guys, I want to stress one thing. The videos replaces the classes that you would have attended if we had contact sessions. Die video's vervang die klasse wat jy sou bygewoon het indien ons kontak met mekaar sou gehad het. Jy moet na die video's gaan kyk. So gaan kyk na die video eerste. Dan vat jy die vraag, dan probeer jy die vraag uitwerk op jou eie sonder om te gaan koekeloer na die antwoord. Dan merk jy jou antwoord. Dan gaan kyk jy waar het jy verkeerd gegaan. En dan gaan jy en jy verduidelik aan jouself, jy kan weer na die video gaan kyk as dit nodig is. Hoekom jy die pad verlaat het, waar het jy die pad verlaat en hoekom lyk die antwoord soos wat hy lyk. So asseblief, as jy volgende week wil deurkom, doen wat die Antie jou vertel om te doen. If you want to pass next week, do what I tell you to do. Otherwise, if you fail next week, there's very little that we can do in order to pull you through. Good, let's look at the other scenarios that you have to go and look. You have examples of this in your study unit. Make sure that you can do these transactions as well. The guy pays within the settlement period, but there was no expectation when the sales transaction happened that the outstanding balance would have been settled in the settlement discount period. What does this mean? There was no expectation. So when we actually recorded the sales transaction, we wouldn't have created an allowance for settlement discount. Now the guy pays within the settlement discount. We don't have an allowance for settlement discount. When does the allowance for settlement discount account expires? When payment takes place. So I cannot create an allowance for settlement discount now because payment has now happened. I cannot now try to create such an account. With the creation, that account has already expired. So what do I have to do? The VAT exclusive portion of the discount that you utilize will now be posted against sales. And then obviously the VAT on the discount will be claimed as VAT input. The debtors account will still be cleared with a full invoice amount, and in my bank account, I will only receive the amount after the settlement discount has been deducted. Kom ons kyk na die eerste scenario. Die ou betaal binne die vereffeningskortingsperiode, maar aanvanklik was daar geen verwagting dat die debiteur die vereffening sou benut nie. So wat het gebeur met die verkoopstransaksie? Toe ek die verkoopstransaksie te boek gestel het, het ek nie 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting geskep nie, want ek het nie gedink hy gaan daarvan gebruik maak nie. Nou betaal hy binne die vereffeningskorting. So wat betaal hy my? Hy betaal vir my die bedrag nadat hy die vereffeningskorting afgetrek het. Ek het nie 'n toelaagrekening in my boeke nie. So wat moet ek nou doen? In my bankrekening debiteer ek die bedrag wat ek werklik ontvang het. Die debiteur se rekening krediteer ek met die werklike uitstaande faktuurbedrag. Ek kan nie nou 'n toelaagrekening gaan skep nie, dames en here, want wanneer verval 'n toelaagrekening? Wanneer betaling plaasvind. So ek kan nou nie meer 'n toelaag gaan skep nie, maar wat gaan ek wel doen? Ek gaan die BTW uitgeslote gedeelte van die verkorting wat hy benut het, neem na verkope toe. So ek gaan verkope gaan ek dan debiteer met die BTW uitgesluite bedrag van die korting en dan die BTW op die korting gaan ek eis as BTW inset. Goed. Let's look at the second scenario. The guy pays after the settlement period has expired, but there was an expectation that he will utilize the settlement discount when the sales transaction was recorded. So if there was an expectation when we recorded the sales transaction, I would have created an allowance for settlement discount. Now he pays after the settlement discount. So is he entitled on a settlement discount? No, he isn't. So what will I receive from this guy? I will receive from him the full invoice value. So I will debit bank, credit debtors with the same amount, i.e. the invoice value. I have created an allowance for settlement discount when the sales transaction was recorded. That settlement discount account has expired now. Why? Because payment has taken place and the settlement discount period has expired. So what do we have to do now? Now we're going to debit the allowance for settlement discount that we initially created with the sales transaction, and we are going to credit sales with that amount. What is that amount? That amount equals the VAT exclusive expected discount. Hierdie ouetjie betaal nadat die vereffeningskortingsperiode verstryk het. Die verwagting was egter, toe die verkoopstransaksie plaasgevind het, dat hy die vereffeningskorting sou benut. So wat het gebeur met die verkooptransaksie? Met die verkooptransaksie het ek 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting gaan skep, want ek het die verwagting gehad dat hy van daardie korting gebruik gaan maak. Nou betaal hy, maar hy betaal my na die vereffeningskorting verstreke is. Tydperk verstreke is. So wat moet hy my nou betaal? Nou moet hy my die volle uitstaande skuld, die volle faktuurbedrag betaal. So die bedrag wat ek in my bankrekening gaan ontvang is presies dieselfde as die uitstaande skuld in die debiteerrekening. Maar onthou, toe ek die verkoopstransaksie te boek gestel het ek die vereffeningskorting persentasie na die toelaag vir vereffeningskortingrekening toe geneem. Wanneer verval daai toelaagrekening? Wanneer betaling plaasvind of wanneer die vereffeningstydperk verstryk het? Nou albei het plaasgevind nou. Die vereffeningstydperk het verstryk en betaling het plaasgevind. So ek moet nou van daai toelaagrekening uit my boeke uit ontslae raak. So wat maak ek met hom? Om ontslae te raak van hom, gaan ek hom met debiteer en wat is sy teenbeen? Verkope. So ek gaan verkope nou meer maak en as ek verkope nou meer gemaak het, gaan jy sien die totale bedrag van daardie faktuur, BTW uitgesluite bedrag, lê nou in die verkoperekening soos dit moet. Die toelaag is uit my boeke uit, bank het ek die volle bedrag ontvang, debiteure is skoon gemaak, so al my transaksies is korrek te boek gestel. The third scenario, guys, is when there is a sliding scale of settlement discount. What does that mean? That means, for instance, if he pays within 5 days, you get a 10% settlement discount. If he pays within 10 days, you get a 2% settlement discount, and if he pays within 15 days, you get a 1% settlement discount. So now, in a case like that, when a sales transaction takes place, I must ask myself, is there expectation that the guy will utilize the settlement discount? If the answer is yes, I must ask the next question. When do I expect him to pay? Do I expect him to pay within 5 days, 10 days, or 15 days? And depending on the settlement discount percentage applicable on 5 days, 10 days, or 15 days, I must go and create an allowance for settlement discount account. The rest of the transaction looks the same. It's just the percentages that's going to differ, that's going to go to the allowance account and to the sales account. But now the problem comes when he actually pays his outstanding balance, because now I must ask myself, when did he pay the outstanding balance? And then I must go and have a look, in what settlement period did he actually pay the outstanding invoice? And then the actual settlement discount that he has utilized will fall within the actual period that he has paid his account, his outstanding account. Now let's assume that we thought that he's going to pay within 10 days. So we have created a 2% settlement discount allowance account. Now he pays within 5 days and now he's entitled on a 5% settlement discount account. How much can we take out of the allowance account? Only the 2%. The remaining 3% that he has utilized now, that entry will take place against sales. So it is exactly the same principles that we're going to apply. We just apply everything in the same question now. So please go and have a look at Stationery Express. There's another question. You have 2 questions with examples for this. Please make sure that you understand how to handle that. Okay, dames en heren, die derde scenario is enetjie waar jy jou kop mooi moet gebruik en dit is waar daar 'n glyskaal van vereffeningskortings gebruik gemaak word. En dit beteken byvoorbeeld as 'n ou binne 5 dae betaal na die faktuurdatum, kry hy argumentsonthaalwe 'n 10% vereffeningskorting. As hy binne 10 dae betaal, kry hy 3% en as hy binne 15 dae betaal, kry hy net 1%. So wanneer ek nou die verkoopstransaksie gaan te boek stel, is my vraag nog steeds, dink ek die ou, is my verwagting dat hy van 'n effeningskorting gaan gebruik maak? As die antwoord ja is, dan moet ek 'n tweede vraag vra. In watter periode dink ek gaan hy betaal? As ek dink hy gaan binne die kom ons sê 10 dae periode betaal, dan moet ek van die 3% of die 2% wat ook al die persentasie is wat gekoppel is aan die 10 dae, van daardie persentasie gebruik maak om die toelaagrekening te skep. So wanneer werklike betaling nou plaasvind, gaan ek ook eers vra wat is die bedrag wat die ou gaan betaal en daardie bedrag gaan ek bepaal deur te gaan kyk in watter periode hy werklik dan die faktuur gaan betaal het. Kom ons sê hy betaal dan binne 5 dae, met ander woorde hy is nou geregtig op 'n hoër persentasie vereffeningskorting as die toelaag wat ek geskep het. Dan moet die verskil tussen die vereffeningskorting wat hy benut het, kom ons sê hy kry 5%, maar ek het die toelaag geskep teen 2%. Daai verskil van 3% gaan dan teen verkope reggemaak word. Die totale korting is 5%, so die BTW gaan op die totale korting van 5% bereken word, die BTW inset. So gaan kyk asseblief, jy het meer, jy het daar's 2 voorbeelde wat jy het, wat hierdie tipe van glyskaal van vereffeningskortings het. Stationery Express is die een, ek kan nie rarig onthou, ek dink Monaco was die ander een gewees. Monza, ek dink Monza was die ander een gewees. Guys, I think Monza was the other example for the sliding scale of settlement discounts. Maak seker jy weet hoe om dit te hanteer. And then I tell you, remember settlement discount exclusive of that, plus sales, which is also exclusive of that, those 2 is the total VAT exclusive sales amount. So it must always come back to the total VAT exclusive amount. Ek sê toe nou, die vereffeningskorting wat BTW uitsluit, dan word jou toelaagrekening, nee. Plus my verkope wat 'n inkomsterekening is wat ook BTW uitsluit. Daai 2 saam moet altyd gelykstaande wees aan die BTW uitgeslote faktuurwaarde. Let's look at disclosure. The statement of financial position as of 31 December, the same as what we had before. If you look at the note for trade receivables, we will have gross debtors. We will have our allowance for credit losses that in the previous example that we're going to deduct from that. And then if there are any valid allowance for settlement discount balances as at year end, that should be the balance of your allowance account at year end, and that will also be deducted from my trade debtors, my gross trade debtors. This trade debtors figure is my debtors control account balance. So my net trade debtors will then be the amount that will appear under current assets, trade receivables in the statement of financial position. Openbaarmaking, dames en here, net soos net nou, het ek die gesig van my staat van finansiële posisie en ek het my aantekeninge. My handelsdebiteure, daai syfer van 54.700 is altyd my debiteurskontrole rekeningssaldo soos aan die einde van die finansiële jaar. En dan gaan ek van hom aftrek my toelaag vir kredietverliese soos in die vorige voorbeeld En as daar enige geldige toelaag vir vereffeningskorting saldos bestaan aan die einde van die finansiële tydperk, dit moet ook die saldo wees op daai toelaagrekening, dit gaan dan ook afgetrek word van my handelsdebiteure syfer, my debiteurskontrolerekening syfer met ander woorde, en net my netto handelsdebiteure gaan op my staat die gesig van my staat van finansiële posisie onder bedryfsbates verskyn as handelsdebiteure. Ag, gaan weg. Okay. Question time. I'm listening.
Mevrou, ons wil net weet of die toetse gaan oor al die werk wat ons al gedoen het en of dit net oor die laaste 2 eenhede is.
Lees. Ek dink nie julle kan lees nie. Ek dink jy kan doen die moeite om vir julle announcements te gee op die foon nie, wat deurgaan is 'n e-mail op jou adres plus 'n WhatsApp boodskap. En julle kan net nie lees nie. Guys, my big question is, can you guys read? I send you an email via an Ifundi announcement. So you have on Ifundi the announcement, you receive an email, and I repeat that thing on a WhatsApp message. And you still come and ask me over and over again the same flippant questions. The question is, do you write on all the work done? Nou, as ek daai vraag nog een keer moet beantwoord, dan maak ek myself vol. Ja. You will always write all tests, all exams on all the work done for the year. Alle toetse en eksamens gaan oor alle werk wat jy deur die jaar gedoen het. Moet my asseblief nie weer daai vraag vra nie, want ek gaan myself beval. Are there any intelligent questions now? Yes, the question, okay, let's talk about the test. The test also has 3 questions. It counts out of 50 marks. You will again get 110 minutes to do everything. 90 minutes writing and reading time, 20 minutes technical time. So die toets stel uit 50 punte, daar is 3 vrae, jy het weer 110 minute, waarvan 90 minute skryftyd is en 20 minute tyd is om te scan, op te laai en te e-pos. Any other intelligent questions?
Ekskuus tog mevrou, ek wil net weet, gaan ons weer 3 uur begin skryf, soos vorige week?
Ja, ons gaan 2 uur begin. We're going to start at 2 o'clock, not at 3 o'clock. Okay.
Okay, dankie.
As I don't know whether Miss, ek dink julle is Afrikaans, Angelique nou en Suzanne nou. Julle moet my baie dringend kontak, want ek moet baie dringend met julle in kontak kom voordat die dissiplinêre verhoor plaasvind. Good. More questions?
Ekskuus mevrou, ek wil net vra, ons het M-Law klas daai Woensdag 1 uur. So ek weet nie of ons 2 uur al gaan
Laat. Pardon?
Dit hou partykeer aan tot 2:15 tot 2 uur. Elke klas verskil, maar dit hang af hoe lank die eenheid vir die dag is, mevrou.
Okay, dan sal ek reël dat jy 2:30 begin. Is dit beter?
Ekskuus mevrou, ons het dan 'n e-kon soos Teams klas ook, en in daai klas dan skryf ons sulke klein toetsies en is net oop vir daai periode. Dit begin 3:30.
Tot hoe laat?
Dit hang ook af mevrou, maar daar's ons 2 klasse, daar's een wat 3:30 en een wat 4 uur begin. Maar ons dosent is nou weg, so ons begin die 4 uur 1, dan is dit gewoonlik ook so 1 uur of 1 uur en 'n half.
Jy sien die probleem is net as ek het te laat begin, dan die ouens wat moet gaan na internetkafees toe of na die kampus toe of wat ook al, gaan nie daai toets kan skryf nie, want hulle kan nie daai tyd van die aand reis nie.
Mevrou,
Vanoggend.
ons het nie M-Law daai dag 'n Zoom sessie wat ook kon doen. Ons skryf net toets daai week. So ons het nie 'n Zoom sessie daai week vir M-Law nie. Dus ons dalk die oggend kan skryf, het ons die middag hier kon pas.
Het julle die oggend oop?
Ja, die oggend het ons nie klas nie.
Heeltemal oop.
Ja, heeltemal.
Alright, dan gaan ek reël dat julle 9 uur skryf. Maar ek sal bevestig met julle, want ek moet eers by die ander kampusse ook eers reël, nê? Maar dan gaan ek dit 9 uur maak die oggend. Is dit beter?
Ja, dankie mevrou.
Ja, baie dankie mevrou.
Okay guys, for those who didn't understand, I will just have to confirm this with you, but I will obviously send you an email, a WhatsApp and an Ifundi announcement, so just read it this time. And if it is okay with the other campuses, we will then write it at 9 o'clock in the morning. So ons gaan dit dan 9 uur die oggend skryf, 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay.
Mevrou Swart,
Yes.
ek dink dit is dalk 'n goeie idee as mevrou op die ACCC WhatsApp groep mevrou die admin maak sodat net mevrou boodskappe kan stuur, want ons het ons eie groep en alles en dit is net baie irriterend seker vir mevrou as almal deel die boodskappe stuur.
Ja, maar ek wil dit nie doen nie, want baie keer het julle vra wat julle vir my vra en wat belangrik is, dat die res van die groep dit ook sien. So as almal nou net ophou met al hulle snaakse gesiggies en goetertjies, dan kan dit dalk beter raak. Dan die WhatsApp groep pla my nie so baie nie. Dit is as ek hom oopmaak en al lê 40 boodskappe, dan sak my moed in my skoene in, maar dit is my so hengse probleem daai nie. Ek kan daarmee amper saamlewe, maar wat ek nie meer kan saamlewe nie, is al die inligting wat ek deurgee en julle lees dit net nie. Julle is nie almal skuldig nie. Ek weet julle is nie almal skuldig nie, maar my magtig, dit maak my lam. Okay. So ek wil nie ek wil nie net dat ek self daarop gaan doen, ek wil graag interaksie daarso op hê en dit is my belangrik dat julle baie keer vra ons goeie vrae ook. Dis regtig. En dan ook baie keer kry ek nogal 'n aanduiding van wat is die tipe goed waarmee jy sukkel. So dan kan ek miskien weer 'n ding daaroor gee of weer iets daaroor sê of wat ook al. So ek wil dit nie sommer doen nie.
Okay, ek verstaan mevrou, dankie.
Okay, nog vrae of opmerkings, more questions or remarks? Okay, ek gaan nie volgende week 'n Zoom sessie hê nie, ek is nou klaar daarmee, want ek het nou alles gedoen waaroor julle skryf, julle skryf tot aan die einde van les 1 uit 5 volgende week. So, Dinsdag is daar geen werk nie, ek het nou al die werk opgelaai op die Fundi, so I've loaded all the work on die Fundi, so all you have to do is you have to go through the videos, you have to watch the videos, and you must make sure that you can do all those questions in the study unit. Okay. Right.
Mevrou?
Ja.
Ek wil net gou seker maak, in mevrou se bewerkings deur die hoofstuk, soos byvoorbeeld met settlement discounts, ek wil net seker maak hoe mevrou die bewerkings doen, want hierso was settlement discount percentage en dan expected to utilize, en dan neem ek dis 'n asterisk, so ek neem aan dis maal met
Ja.
herexekusie.
Ja.
So, maar wat beteken die settlement discount percentage? Hoe expected to
Dit is soos, as ek na die kredietterme kyk, kom ons sê 5.15. Dis daar 5, dis 5%. Of ek sê vir jou in 'n lang sin, wat ek jou waarskynlik nie sal sê nie, maar ek kan vir jou ook 'n lang sin sê. If as 'n debiteer sy rekening binne 10 dae vereffen, is hy geregtig op 'n 2% vereffeningskorting. Nou dit is daai settlement discount waarvan ek praat. So if a client settles his account within 10 days, he is allowed to utilize a 2% settlement discount. So dis daai 2% waarvan ek elke keer praat.
Okay. So dis maar net die persentasie en dan
Dis die persentasiekorting, ja.
Ja, okay. Ek wil maar net seker maak want dit het nou nie vir my regtig baie sin gemaak nie.
Ja, okay. Gaan kyk weer daarna as dit
Dankie mevrou.
dan WhatsApp in my, okay.
Dis reg, dankie mevrou.
Okay. Dames en here, julle is welkom om my te WhatsApp met julle probleme, hoor. Ek het nie probleem nie en dan net wat ek vergeet om te sê, ek is maandag en dinsdag op kantoor volgende week. So as jy my wil kom sien, maak net 'n afspraak, ek is hierso. Okay. Alright. Sterkte, cheerio. Ek dink aan julle. Wees sterk en eis die volgende toets groot asseblief vir ons almal. Okay.
Dankie mevrou.
Dankie mevrou.
Hey, bye.
Mevrou.